think we are underway towards YouTube. All right, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to Charity.
Okay, welcome everybody. It's 6:02 according to my clock. And tonight we're going to shoot for as close to a 2-hour meeting as we can. One of the ways I'd like to do that is to follow the model of the city council meetings where they take public comment and then they ask the council members if they have questions for the speaker. And if there are no questions, then they move on to the next public comment. Does that sound like a good plan for our public comment?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Secondly, I just want to ask just a matter of procedure. We have some commissioner activity reports on the agenda tonight. We have discussion items and we have presentations. Do I ask for public comments after each one of those segments?
You will want to after 5A, 6A, and 7A.
Okay.
And quick question, are public comments limited to a certain number of minutes like city council? So is it a 3-minute comment?
Yes. And is
So-
somebody keeping track of that?
Yes, Jonathan, or I will do that.
Okay,
Great.
thanks.
Okay, any other questions before we start? All right, here we go. Good evening. I now call the February 2nd, 2021 meeting of the Lafayette General Plan Advisory Committee to order. This meeting is streaming live on the city's YouTube and is also accessible by Zoom webinar. Link to log in on the city's calendar. We will do a roll call for those committee members in attendance. Staff will read out the names aloud. Committee members, when you hear your name, please affirm your presence.
Okay. Chris Lee,
Here?
Jim Cervantes,
Here.
Christine Rasmussen,
Present.
Susie Kelly,
Here.
Mike Kim,
Here.
Dick Craig,
Present.
Carol Singer,
Present.
Amrita Kaslanati,
Here.
Don Jenkins,
Here.
Matt Pease,
Here.
and Beth Needle.
Here.
Thank you. Would a committee member like to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'd like to make that motion.
I second.
Great. And shall we go through an aye for each committee member or nay?
Go for it.
Yep, just a moment. Okay. Chris Lee,
Aye.
Jim Cervantes,
Aye.
Christine Rasmussen,
Aye.
Susie Kelly,
Aye.
Mike Kim,
Aye.
Dick Craig,
Aye.
Carol Singer,
Aye.
Namrata Kaslanati, Don Jenkins,
Aye.
Matt Pease,
Aye.
and Beth Needle.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. The agenda is adopted. So we'll move on now to public comments. As we said before, public comments will be limited to 3 minutes with an opportunity for committee members to ask questions after the comments. And do we have any public comments waiting?
Well, just note if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. or *9 if you're calling in. And again, this section is for any items not on the agenda.
Oh, sorry about that. This is public comments for any item not on the agenda. If your comment pertains to an item on the agenda, please wait until the public comment is opened for those items.
I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll move on to our presentations. I'm sorry, we have commissioner activity reports. First, we'll hear from the City Mission Statement Subcommittee.
Hi, everyone. I can lead this off and would love to get input from Matt and Ratha when I'm done. You have in your packet a draft charter, which is a document we worked through in our last session last week with Sarah and Jamie Harris. The idea was to sort of lay out our sort of like expected game plan, if you will, and what we could see as the process and the deliverable. At the top, I think the two key things here are that the idea with regards to the mission statement, and we also talked about some maybe statement of vision and values, is to, provided we get sign off from this group and the council, to go out, gather citizen input, ideally dovetailed with the process we're going to be going through with the housing element, to try to make that a part of it, to gather in kind of a broader perspective from the community as to where people see now what elements of the mission statement and city values might be. And then at the end point, draft something so that we could put it out to this group and then ultimately the council. We thought that would actually be probably the easiest way to digest this, if there's something in writing that people can then work with, or they can use that as a piñata, I suppose. But the key thing here was that we'd like to set up a process which is really iterative, starting with this discussion right now, wherein we seek feedback from the GPAC and would love to get feedback from the council, ideally to make sure that we're on the right track here, that we're not getting too far afield from where people think this ought to be. Our idea after we go through this draft charter would be going forward to sort of update GPAC on an ongoing basis. To that end, we're likely going to be meeting every other week, sort of sequencing off of when the weeks GPAC is not meeting, because our goal would be to try to get this done in May of this year. Now, that may be totally or wildly optimistic, but that's what the goal, we set a big, hairy, audacious goal here to try to get that done, to present recommendations to GPAC and the City Council. I'm not going to go through all of this. This entails some work that we did with Jamie to try to figure out what's our working arrangement to try to make this as collaborative within our group as possible and consensus-based. I think the main thing here was to sort of put this in front of you to make sure that as GPAC looks at it, are we going in the right direction? And we'll follow up and solicit council input as well. Maybe I'll stop there. Matt and Ratha, anything you can think of that I missed here that the group should be aware of?
Yeah, the only thing I would add, Jim, would be that we're hoping to use the Bang the Table application to broaden as much as possible input from the public at large. So, Jonathan, I don't know whether you're the one that has the lead on that from a staff standpoint, but if you are, we would welcome your involvement in trying to use that tool to solicit public input. And then we'll also try to have slides that we can add to any of the presentations that people are doing that could help drive that public input, which is going to be so important. Namrat, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you both covered it.
Okay, very good. Does the committee have any questions for our subcommittee?
I have a couple of questions. I noticed you were referring to it as a sub-team instead of a subcommittee, which is a little bit inconsistent with the other documents. Was there a reason that you're using a sub-team approach? And then a little bit in the body of the document. I found some of it a little weighty. So I'm wondering if it could be simplified a little bit. It's a little, I mean, these things are so difficult to put together, especially for a new group with something really big on their hands. But I'm finding that this might be a little difficult to for people to digest. So if you can simplify the goals and objectives, maybe take some of the jargon out of it.
Okay, it's good feedback.
Yeah, and I put some edits and I'm glad to send them off to you.
Sure.
If that would be, just my opinion. But I was curious about the sub-team name.
I can't recall, I don't think there was any much discussion. I think it may have been a phrase that Jamie used, and I think we just meant the same thing as a subcommittee.
Right.
Jim or Amarantha, do you have any other recollection of that?
This is Jamie. Yes, I'll speak up to that. I'll claim that as just a word I used. Sub-team, subcommittee. I don't think there would be any difference in intent and if subcommittee seems to fit the expectations of the GPAC committee better, fine, change it.
Okay.
Yeah, we really didn't spend much time at all talking on that one. And I think we certainly would welcome any comments on this. So really, that would be much appreciated.
Thank you.
Do any of the committee members have comments on?
Yes, I have my hand up.
Go ahead, Karen.
I agree with Beth completely. I'm also concerned about there are two things here: the mission statement itself, and then this is one of the city goals, the core values of the city. To me, they're two different articles, two different things. And our mission statement is only 3 sentences long. I think I sent you all, Arinda or Moraga has 1 sentence, and Arinda has, I think, 4 bullet points. So I would hate to see our mission statement become a page long or something. I think to me the 3 sentences are very clear, except for the few things I pointed out, maybe adding diversity and sustainability are new things. And then the goal, the white papers, all of the cities, the goals and objectives that were done have quite long white papers adopted by the council, except for this one, which they referred to GPAC. So it seems to me this one, the core values and vision of the city, this could end up being like some of the other white papers, 5 pages long. So to me, these are 2 separate things, and I would like to see them kept separately, because the mission statement is something the city follows too. It's really the core of the city's values. Now, I'd hate to see that become 5 pages long, and then you're trying to do general plans or specific plans, and you have to look at 5 pages instead of something very simple of the core values. That's my comment.
Yeah, Carol, what we had talked about is the brevity comment is something we'd like to have too. It shouldn't be 5 pages, but one of the things that we want to have is a vision, which we kind of equated to kind of the goal, what the destination of where do we want to land as a city. And then the mission is kind of how we operate. And I think that starts to incorporate the values piece that you discussed. So for example, today, the vision is that, we're trying to preserve and enhance our semi-rural character. That's a vision statement. And then the mission is using volunteers on commissions and committees, and keeping the staff small was the kind of the mission of that's the old one that was done back in the 60s. So I thought both of those were a good mission and a good mission and vision statement, and they're relatively short. And that would be the goal. Does that help a little bit, Carol?
Yes, whatever you come up with that you want to put in, I just think that they should be two separate things.
Agreed.
One is the white paper and one is the mission statement.
I guess I would just say, to chime in on what Matt said, we are looking at something that is pithy and distilled. I'm not looking at, I think we'd all go crazy if we were trying to do say like a one-page mission statement. That would be insane. So, I mean, the trick is going to be to try to sort of get broader input from the citizens, and in terms of like, what are the concepts that people think of when you think of this community, and distill that down into something in written form that eventually the council can decide what they would like to do with that. I mean, it's got to be to the point, though. So we'd look at it.
Other comments from the committee? Okay, so what is the next step for the subcommittee?
I think we're looking for a roll call vote for if people are comfortable with it as is, or as is with amendments.
Well, yeah, I guess, maybe, and Matt and Roth, we're kind of just freelancing here right now, but maybe the idea would be that if folks have input, would love to see it. And maybe we can kind of do hone this down a bit and to sort of get it back to the group. I think what might be helpful is maybe in a bigger picture conceptually, is this sort of, are we on the right track here? Maybe with some additional edits, or are we out in left field? And maybe that would be helpful to get sort of a reality check, perhaps. I don't know, Matt and Roth, if you see it differently.
No, that's great, Jim.
Okay, so maybe we can take a look at your next iteration at our next committee meeting.
Yeah. So maybe then we'll take input. We'll kind of sharpen this a bit and submit it for the next session. The idea being that hopefully there's something that works and y'all approve. But again, the key right now is, are we like in the ballpark? I think that would be helpful here. And the comments provided so far have been really helpful. Thank you.
And then just before we leave this item, maybe open the public comment to see if there are any questions about, comments about the mission statement draft charter. So if you have a public comment on this item, please raise your hand. I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you very much for your work. This was it looks like a lot of work done in a very short amount of time. So thank you all for doing that.
If I could, I just want to give one shout out to Jamie Harris on this, who was really helpful in getting us organized and moving, tracking down, my Earthlink email address and helping us work collaboratively to get this out. So, it's been a good process so far.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. Okay. Moving on, we have commissioner activity reports for the Senior Services Commission, and that would be Don Jenkins. Also, Matt Peace made a presentation since the last time we all met. So we're going to ask him for a summary of that. And are there any other committee members that made presentations or reached out in some fashion to their constituents that would like to tell us about it? No? Okay, well, we'll proceed with Don.
Dick had his hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Chris, I was just going to say, for transportation and circulation, I'll be presenting on February 17th, 2 weeks. So it's on
Oh, excellent.
will be on the agenda for that group.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I am very pleased to report that Renetta and she did basically all the heavy lifting. I shocked everybody with the fact that we needed to look for 2,100 more units. And then she proceeded to share how we get to this and that we didn't have to build 2,100 new homes, but we just had to find and zone, and that is part of the long-term plan. What we have decided, and Renetta did such a fine job of explaining how we're really trying to get everyone's input, but particularly seniors, and as I'm representing them, to go to our website and to use what we have all agreed would be the best way to acquire a broad base of information. I think the thing that did come out, the seniors are right now, or for the last year, except that we haven't been meeting for the last year, we started with what they call trying to become an ARP certified friendly city, a senior friendly city. And so the Senior Service Commission is getting all kinds, or before COVID hit, we were getting all kinds of input from different seniors as to the different aspects. And the aspects that AARP uses to identify a city as being senior friendly are not all that different from what we're going to be looking at in terms of trying to develop a general plan. So these two things do go hand in glove. The thinking that we had very definitely just the first draft when we saw the numbers was that certainly seniors, if seniors are looking to downsize, they may be ideal candidates for some of these smaller units in terms of new homes. That would be something that would free up a larger home that people want to be sending children to school, et cetera. And seniors, if they are coming downsizing, they could take some of our smaller units that we're having to put together, and they won't have any impact on schools. They will have minimal impact on transportation. In fact, many seniors are losing their ability to drive. And so having a location central to downtown or to all the services would be a good thing. The idea of the ADUs or the junior ADUs was discussed, and the concern simply is how do we do all this? A number of the people were appalled that we're going to have to give up all of our BART parking and wondering where in the world all those cars are going to be going. But I said, that's not our job to figure that out. Our job is to focus with seniors, and the idea of expanding and being not just with the BART parking, but also at West End, across from Oakwood. These are areas that we could see as being things that would be worth looking at, and that the Senior Commission wants to be helpful in trying to help design something that would impact the future program and design of Lafayette.
Great.
Do you have any other additional thoughts that you would add? You did a great job with our group.
Thank you, Don. I think you summed it up pretty well. Thank you.
Does the committee have any questions for Don?
I think it is helpful. This kind of got started, and I think we have defined with my movement and Carol's movement and Dick and some of us who are representing specific standing commissions to say, in effect, our job is to gather information from our constituency and yet at the same time be working with the four general regions where we're going to be looking for input from the various residents in each of those departments. Certainly every one of the seniors in Lafayette live in one of those four constituencies. And so what I'm trying to do is back it up and say, what are the senior related things that could be impacting whatever we come up with?
Don, quick question. Was there any feedback or talk about the cost of housing?
About
With the cost of housing, so if seniors are interested in moving into smaller units in Lafayette, are they interested in a particular cost, a price point within Lafayette?
Obviously, we don't want to downsize and up mortgage. That's not our intent.
I agree, yeah.
But again, the Prop 19, I believe it is, allows us to make some moves. The reality of myself, and I've been here for 50 years, and a Tesla costs more today than what I had to pay for my house. The reality is we are locked into where we are if there are not other places to go, but the laws have changed. And it certainly would be beneficial if I could take my Prop 13 tax rate and move to 1,000 square feet instead of being in 3,000 square feet, and free up this house to collect $22,000 a year instead of $3,000. It would be a win-win for everybody.
So Beth, that is exactly the kind of information we're going to be trying to capture through our engagement process. And so we'll be working with the Senior Services Commission and Dawn to kind of design opportunities to garner that specific input. But this meeting we had with them was really just an introduction to, hey, this is happening.
Perfect, that's good news. Thanks.
Yeah.
Jim?
Don, just real quick, roughly how many people did you have in this session? I'm just kind of curious.
The Senior Service Commission is 6 people, and we had all commissioners present.
Okay.
And, so we have been, for a long, long time, we meet monthly. We have a representative goes to Crime Commission. We have a representative that goes to traffic. And then we come together, and then we have our monthly agenda that's put together by Maureen and the chair of the Senior Service Commission each month.
Okay.
And Donna, actually, I wanted to ask you a question. How did you broadcast your meeting, or did you just take advantage of a planned meeting?
Yeah, it was a planned meeting, and sure we were on the agenda, and then all of a sudden I'll show my dirty laundry. I realized it was 9 o'clock in the morning, and we needed to have all the information that was presented PowerPoint, since we're meeting via Zoom. And I hadn't a clue on how to do that. And I quickly called Sarah, and Sarah quickly passed the buck to Renetta, and she brought all PowerPoint to the meeting, and it went very smoothly.
I'll just point out I used the global PowerPoints that we sent out previously. So that information is available to the public at planlafayette.org, as well as committee members.
Don, if I can, how long did the whole session take?
Oh, what would you, maybe a half hour? Our meeting went a lot longer than it normally goes, so I would guess about a half hour.
Okay. Carol?
Don and I'm on the Park and Rec Commission. Don and I share staff for these meetings. I approached the Park and Rec Commission, and they had an awful lot of questions. One of the problems was the length of the presentation. They all heard the presentation was wonderful, but the length of it, we have a very busy agenda, usually very long agenda. Most of our commissioners have been watching GPAC. So the question was, should we have a special meeting, which they really didn't want to do. And they were very concerned about, okay, what exactly is this presentation? They felt, and through me, we met with Sarah and Chris. We've had a Zoom meeting for an hour to come up with a standard presentation that takes a certain amount of time. In fact, I guess it's like what Renetta did, but Sarah suggested a video. So we could tell, for instance, I could go to my commission and I'm always on the agenda as their GPAC representative. And I could tell them, you know, what's going on, but I could also tell them, here is the video. You can go and watch the video of this presentation. Because we were concerned, you're all asking about Don and Renetta's presentation, but what are you all doing? Like Jim and Chris and I mean, everybody has a different presentation, or what are we doing here? So my commission wanted to wait and see. I think it's on the agenda as number 6, an update. So we have a one presentation that we all can use that is also on the general plan website. We can point people to go and watch this and have it very easy to find on the website. You don't have to go through 5 clicks to find it, and sort of have it be our Bible for people who want to know about all this. And you all could use it. Beth could use it for her nonprofit. I will use it for Park and Rec. So I'm waiting for this meeting because our PTR meeting is next week, and I have to decide whether I just tell them, well, you have to hear this presentation, or you can go and see it for yourself, or just what we're going to decide. So that's where I am with my stakeholder. Just want to throw that in.
Good.
Okay, if there aren't any questions for Carol or Don, Matt, would you like to talk about your meeting?
Sure. The Lafayette Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors did their annual offsite last Saturday on Zoom. And we had a breakout session for housing that had about 4 or 5 members in there that self-selected to be in there. We only had about 20 minutes to be together. Candidly, it was pretty quick. And I spent maybe 7 or 8 minutes selecting some of the slides that the staff had put together to kind of give people an update. And the feedback I got in the meeting was that in general, people were supportive of more housing downtown. They knew it would have to be high density. They'd like it to be mixed use. So there can be retail and commercial with flexible zoning on the ground floor, and working with developers to make sure that there is adequate parking, whatever that means. So those were some of the main points that came out. I did get one email from one of the people that attended, and I forwarded that to the GPAC email alias. And so, Sarah, it's somewhere in the website email that you guys have got, and you can post that at our next meeting. And then I have a meeting coming up with the Lafayette Rotary Club on the 21st, where I'm going to do something similar. So that's all I've got.
So quick question, do we have a standard presentation that we want to just use?
So I'll just quickly jump in and say that the global presentations are sort of the ones that we've created to be those standard presentations, but the feedback we're getting is that they're probably a little bit too long, and there's 3 different ones, and so we anticipate combining some of the information, making it a little bit shorter, and or making it sort of bite-sized pieces in terms of creating the videos and content that people can digest.
Yeah, Mike, I cut out a bunch of the slides and I combined 1 or 2 to shorten up, just because I knew I only had a few minutes with this team.
Okay, so the idea is that by a certain point, we're gonna all have access to a standard presentation?
Correct.
We have to.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
So Matt, when you were talking to the chamber people, they were interested in developing throughout downtown. Was there any discussion about how far east or west they would think about going?
No, we didn't have time to get into that level of detail, Chris, and none of the members that were there mentioned anything specific. They just talked about downtown in general, so it was pretty vague.
And I think some of this some of our where we need to go with this will be answered in the engagement section of the presentation. So maybe if we can work through our updates, then we can.
Okay, great. So just to wrap up, I'm looking at the clock. It's 7:25, so I think we're doing really well. Does anybody have any other questions for any of the presenters? Wonderful. Okay, so we move on to the next agenda item, which is housing element and community engagement plan update.
Chris, right before that is the city council liaison.
Oh,
update.
I'm sorry. I totally jumped over that.
I wanted to essentially sort of a debrief from the previous council meeting.
Yes.
Diana and Susan kind of tackle that one to talk about liaison and also ABAG conversation.
And I probably should have done this at the beginning of the meeting, but welcome Mayor Kandel. We're so happy to have you at our committee meeting tonight.
Thank you. So is this the time to explain how that all happened? Yeah, so what happened is that when a mayor comes in, you do all the committee and commission assignments. And I remember when I became vice mayor, Mike Anderson was mayor, and he brought me in and he goes, hey, there's certain roles that are mayor, vice mayor. And it was finance, which is the budget, which makes total sense. And when I was looking at them, I went, you know what? The other piece of that should be personnel. I thought that would be a nice mix. And so you get the budget and the finance and personnel that are all mayor, vice mayor. I mean, you need to have your arms wrapped around that stuff when you're in those two roles. And then when I was looking at the GPAC, and it just kind of struck me that we have a very young council. The people are relatively new compared to what our council has been like. And this is a really unique opportunity for a deep dive. Literally, I was envisioning now that this role will be a mayor, vice mayor role moving forward. And so each one of us will have the opportunity over the cycle of this, hopefully to take the deep dive and get each one of our viewpoints and our knowledge, much more enhanced into the general plan. And so after this process, our entire council will be that much stronger and will be much more united and have far more knowledge about, really what went into this general plan. So I kind of pitched that, and I didn't know how it was going to go. And it's always up to the council to vote. And the other council members went, oh, wow, that's kind of nice. Let's try that. And so hopefully moving forward, this will be a mayor, vice mayor. And so now it's me and Teresa, and then next year, Teresa, I think it's Cam next, but there will be each one of us coming in here and giving our input and learning from all you guys. And so by the end of this process, hopefully we'll all be all together on this. So that was the thought. So that's what happened. The council voted on it and they agreed. So here we are. I'm not intending this to be more work for staff. The whole vice mayor year, hopefully is the learning year, and to get them up to speed. So hopefully this will be just a nice way to get everybody involved. So anyway, so thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So I was going to give you an update on the oral presentation that Greg and I gave to the city council meeting, and update you that this is what I'm going to share with you is just sort of the high points, and then a longer a longer staff report will go to the city council, and a copy will be sent to the GPAC. We had, perhaps you knew that the council gave us a series of questions to ask of ABAG/MTC in terms of, after all this time that we thought our number was going to be 1660, it blossoms up to 2114. What specifically changed for the number? And that, I think the primary answer to that is that the RHNA methodology to allocate units did not change at all, with one exception, and I'll explain that. What changed was some Plan Bay Area blueprint strategies. They realized that they could not meet the Air Resources Board emissions standards for greenhouse gas emissions, and that they had to add additional strategies to try to move things around and get a sort of a region-wide number that would be that would comply with the GHG emissions requirements. So what they did was they added more policies to increase certain kinds of housing types. They put in policies and strategies to redevelop aging shopping malls and other actions to move jobs to housing-rich areas. Now, this is all a long-term, obviously, infrastructure planning project. And so what that did was those changes went back through the ABAG methodology. And essentially, that's why the city got more units than it did before. And when we asked specifically about how this makes sense that we could actually get 28% higher number allocation from the initial allocation, staff said basically that the modeling that they use does not get at an individual level of individual jurisdictions. So some may be more negatively impacted rather than others. What they're looking for is a region-wide full, what does the region do as a whole? And that this was how they could meet the greenhouse gas emissions targets. The second question that we asked was about what either Plan Bay Area and or the RHNA methodology factor in natural hazards such as sea level rise and high fire zones. And basically they did for Plan Bay Area, they did consult with those maps. They did not include them in the specific, their specific methodology, but they recognize that local jurisdictions do have zoning, which they, in high fire, for example, Lafayette, high fire hazard areas. And the presumption is when they do the modeling that zoning, if it's like 10 acres per unit, then they would assume that zoning would stay the same, that there wouldn't be an increase. However, the end result of that is that you still get the same number of units regardless. You just have to put them in a more geographically confined or constrained way. So lastly, I wanted to, two things. We asked specifically about the pandemic and why wasn't there a pause made and to wait until the effects of the recession would be more clearly felt and understood? And the answer was basically they did take into consideration the short-term effects, but they are looking at a smooth projection into the future, and that even if it were slow here, then things would pick up further in the plan. So it wouldn't have changed much in the way of the actual allocations. And two other final points. One is we asked them whether they had pushed back on the number, the 441,000 unit number that was provided by HCD, the state, to ABAG, and they said yes, they did go back to the state and pushed back on it, but they were rebuffed by staff at HCD. And lastly, one question has been, could we see, please, the modeling information that went into so that we could really understand how this modeling works? And initially he was concerned, the guy that we talked to, Paul Fassinger, who's been with ABAG for many, many, many years, he indicated that he was concerned that proprietary issues and so forth, and that it would require a public records request. But since then, he's come back and said that they're going to try to pull some materials together so they would not have to go that route. In the meantime, we're continuing to work, as you know, on all the things that we have to do for the housing element, because if it's 1,600 units or 2,100 units or whatever number it is, we still have to find sites. So that's a summary of it, and we'll obviously give you a much longer report in the upcoming weeks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
If a particular city were to challenge the methodology, so let's just say that us, among other cities in the Bay Area, say, hogwash, we don't buy it, we're gonna sue. Where does this go? What forum? What legal level? State or what?
It would go to the state, and my understanding is going to be a very difficult. I mean, it's obvious the jurisdictions are going to sue the state. Some have already and also lost their lawsuits. The whole RHNA allocation process, as a very well-known lawyer friend, a housing element lawyer, a friend of mine said, it's not justiciable. That is, court won't know what to do with a RHNA methodology, and that they basically assume that, that people at HCD are experts in what they do, or any other agency in the state. So we're going to really have to, think about, certainly jurisdictions can sue the state. I suspect it'll be a very difficult row to hoe, but that is something for example, the city council to deal with. We just, as staff level, we have to really just focus on getting you a housing element that's fully in compliance.
Diana?
Yes.
This is Matt. Several meetings ago, when you had the earlier number, you came up with some scenarios.
Yes.
You and the staff, scenarios that help, at least to help me kind of visualize what this might look like. Are you planning to do something in the near future similar to that with this new number? And if so, when?
We've decided to pause based on discussions with the environmental review consultants, because if the number is a moving target, we think we need a more solid number, a more official number. So the ABAG methodology has now gone to the state for its review, and when it gives its blessing, if it gives its blessing, which it should, because they were involved in some of the discussions about this, then the number that comes back to us is an official draft RHNA allocation. And that's the point at which we can start developing scenarios.
And I'll also chime in and say that while we're waiting for that number to be accomplished, we are doing our public engagement process, which we talked about with this group, which is to help identify the criteria for which we might identify opportunity sites.
Correct. And we're working on that at the staff level of trying to figure out a good rubric for how we can go through and identify sites and determine their suitability for development. We've been doing that before, but it hasn't been, the state has provided certain guidance that based on laws that changed. And then I've recently put together sort of a step-by-step thing about how, based on these laws, this is the order in which things need to be looked at. So we're still working at that and discussing it internally before we share it outside.
Well, I guess where I was headed with this is it's helpful when you get input from the community that you can kind of help them conceive of groupings or vertical sizing or things like that, Diana, that I think help people grasp potential areas like up by Oakwood or on the east side, or, all of those things. And I don't know, anything you guys can do to help us with that, to lead that or spur that discussion or that thought process, I think might be helpful.
Right. When we have a better sense of what the number is, and as we go through getting feedback first from the community, then we'll be able to do some bulk suggestions. I can't say that these are going to be design things because we don't know what's actually going to be built.
No, I understand.
So the process is, okay, we can tell you generally speaking what this, what the size might be. But the level of detail for this EIR is not to do shadow studies. I mean, there will be some discussion of it, but it's not as specific as it would be if it were a project that was coming before the city for development.
Matt, I think I understand your concern, and we do have some intention to do some visual preference surveys and also some understanding visually what density looks like.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
What's the significance of July 2022 again? Diana, can you refresh your memory?
There are two things. One is July 2022 is when we have to have completed the rezoning of the BART station. And it's also that's a statutorily defined date when that has to be done. The other thing is June 30th or July 1st, whatever, 2022 is the date that any project that is still in construction gets to count towards the RENA allocation for the new cycle. So it's a really important point for us to be able to say, this project isn't going to be done until October of that year. Therefore, we get to count it against our RENA allocation.
And Chair Lee, can I just ask if you can see folks' hands raised? There are some. If not, I'm happy to.
Yes, I can see Carol and Christine.
Jim.
Okay, Carol, would you like to go?
Yeah, okay. I'm a little bit confused. Are we, the scenarios, we're sort of trade-offs. If you build, you rezone at BART, then whatever that is, then you do less on Deer Hill and vice versa. Are we going to, are we going to be looking at just sites, or are we going to put together more scenarios, but that are different, that accommodate the higher numbers? Because whether I thought 100 units would be good across from Oakwood if BART only had 50, I mean, just as an example, and then the trade-offs, how do we, that's something you have to have a scenario about.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You can't just take all the lots and assign something.
Right, but we also have to go do a site-by-site review. We can't just look at a big area and say, oh, we're going to rezone this. We actually have to select sites. The law requires us to select sites by assessor parcel number in either groups to create, consolidated sites on which housing could potentially be built. And so that exercise is a little bit more involved because the site-by-site review is really what the state is looking at, whether this is actually, in fact, a viable list of sites that can be developed. So we have a huge spreadsheet that we have to create for every single site that we come up with that we think may make a good opportunity site. And from that, then we can create scenarios on each one of those, whatever the locations are.
Okay, so we will end up with new scenarios for the consultant.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Christine?
I have a couple questions. When you're talking about parcel numbers, I was under the impression we couldn't rezone one single particular parcel. I thought we had to rezone, so it doesn't become favorite. I can't remember the term you used.
Spot zoning.
But what's it called? Spot zoning?
Spot zoning, correct.
So what's the difference between what you're talking about and what you just told Carol?
If we need to actually come up with sites that are potentially good for development, and if that zoning is not currently conducive to the amount of zoning or amount of units we think should go on that site, that area will get upzoned. So everybody would be upzoned, but it impacts, for the purposes of the housing element, the site that we have identified as the best for development. Now, if they may be in that zone, there may be 25 beautiful houses that were built last year. We clearly know that those are not opportunity sites because they're new. However, there may be underutilized sites, and we can count those. But the zoning is a process of changing how development occurs over a wide area, allowing for some people to develop new stuff if they want, and others, if they don't want to, they don't have to. But that in terms of identifying specific sites in the housing element, that is a legal requirement so that we can show we know we can meet the RENA allocation with A, B, C, D, and E sites.
And those areas then would be rezoned.
Correct.
So I don't know, how big are these areas? Is there a specific, is
Well,
it 5 acres or what defines the area?
I think that we're getting a little bit away from the discussion, and maybe
Yeah.
that we can save that for later. Is
Okay.
that I'm getting a hand signal from Sarah?
I just want to make sure that we do have time for everything. And
Okay.
we can certainly go down a rabbit hole. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so if you can try to hit that one next time, maybe,
Sure.
because I'll probably forget it. And then I had one other question, if I haven't forgotten what it is. So just to review, so we're gonna have to identify 2,100 or so sites, but we have to have that buffer, right?
Plus
We
a
have to have
buffer,
a
yeah.
buffer. And what buffer number percentage are we looking at right now? Is it 50?
We were shooting for 50, and most of the jurisdictions I'm working with are shooting for 50.
Okay.
We had
50%.
almost 100% buffer last time. So this time 50% is pretty small. The state recommends at least 15 to 30%. And considering all the new laws about if you take a site out of an inventory and develop it with something that isn't housing, the requirements to replace it become onerous. So we can use that buffer if we don't actually use it during the housing element period. We can use that towards the next housing element as reasonable sites.
So we can save it and use it.
Yes.
Now, what happens ultimately at the end of whatever the cycle is, I guess, we're not finding that we're getting the housing units built like we were supposed to. So developers aren't coming in, they're not building the low income or the below market rate. So what is the consequence to us if we don't attract developers to do these buildings of low income? Is that when we start losing our zoning and our codes and we have to start giving things up, or how does this work?
No, what usually happens is that if we aren't meeting certain levels of affordability, then the city would be subject to streamlining projects, basically, that a developer can come in without any sort of discretionary review and develop according to the zoning that's there, but basically not have any, there'd be much more ministerial action. It's basically a rubber stamp. I mean, you'd still be able to, you'd still be able to use design review as long as the design review standards are objective standards. It will not be something like, we don't like the way it looks. That can't be a reason to deny a project anymore.
Right. So like what's going on, let's say with the Golden Gateway right now, we have some sort of input on how it looks, the colors they're using, and we would not be able to do any of that.
Oh, no, you would still be able to do it, but it would be basically a ministerial action anyway. You could have input. It's just that the action becomes ministerial.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. So I saw Anna's hand up and I saw Jim's hand up, but they're both down, and then Mayor Kandel. So Anna, do you want to ask a question?
Well, I was going to, thank you, but Diana, it might be too much of in the weeds type question, so I'll just put it out there for future conversation. I lost the connection between rezoning the BART lot and the fact that the lot is located in a very high fire severity zone, and the conversation feedback from ABAG saying that you're not required to upzone something in a high fire severity zone. So if that's something we could talk about next time,
Sure.
I'd
I'll give
appreciate
some
it.
detail on that, sure.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you, Anna. And Jim?
Yeah, I had a question, but I was afraid I might take us in the weeds. So let me just push that back and see where the rest of this conversation goes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Mayor Kandel?
Yeah, so just to add to the council update. So real quick, when are you thinking that we're going to get that final draft number?
The number, the only thing we know is it is in the spring of this year. We don't know where the draft will be exactly, the spring of this year.
Great. Okay. And so just to follow up, so we can also appeal that number through the summer. This was part of the council conversation that we had. Many sites down in Southern California have appealed this year, the cycle, which is really unusual. And I imagine the same thing will happen in the Bay Area. So I would imagine Lafayette will appeal that number. It also, it is a struggle to understand this process because we did already go through some scenarios for the IR without going through site by site details. And so it does seem odd that this second time around, we're going to try to do the site by site before we kind of come up with the scenarios, because I didn't see that analysis done on the last one. So maybe we can get some clarity on that one.
It was done before. We did the site-by-site analysis prior to the scenarios.
Oh, so maybe we should get that out to this group.
There's no reason why, but we just need to let everybody know this was a complete draft and that, it's bound to change. So.
And I think now the goal is to allow the community. So we have the requirements that are set by HCD, right? We have to, use certain criteria. And then this group has also decided that they would like the community to identify criteria by which we would pick sites. So it wouldn't just be, staff looking at, does this make sense? Is this a possibility based on the criteria from HCD? Cool. It would be both those things.
Super, great. And back to the request, I did ask Diana to see if we could go in and check out the methodology, because on the last cycle, Don Tatson and Brant Anderson did go and talk to ABAG and questioned the methodology and did find some issues. And that was my question, to see if we could go back in on this time. And I think there is some effort for us to go in and try to understand their methodology and find out what is going on a more detailed look from council. So just wanted to let you know.
We have a hand up from Carol.
Yes, I'm a little confused, and maybe we want to go over it next time as to how this site selection works. Diane, you're going to give us the map, and then we're going to look at it, and we're going to do the scenarios and pass it on to the council. We'll give it to the consultant, or just how is this going to work? I mean, and then we have input. So
well, we have to do a couple of things, and the first is to actually start identifying sites as potentials, and then discuss whether they're good sites based on what we have in terms of direction and requirements from the state. Not every site we can identify can be an opportunity site. However, we need to know that before we can develop these so-called scenarios, so that we understand where chunks of the city would get greater percentage of greater percentage of housing. So we'll come back and talk about that more in detail, how this actually works next time. I think maybe if there's time.
Yeah, I think that's important for the public to know also, that it's not just their input saying, oh, it should go here, and 20 people vote for A and 30 for B and whatever.
And I think, so this is sort of supposed to be an activity update, just a report, not really a formal discussion. And I think we have a lot of stuff to talk about at the next meeting. So we'll go ahead and bring those items back for you all to discuss. But I think at this point, we should probably wrap up the update section of the agenda.
Okay, that sounds good. That was a very good conversation. Thank you, everybody. And I hope that in our next meeting in 2 weeks, we can talk about sites and site selection and criteria. That'd be great. Okay, it's 7:05. We're doing great. Next item is housing element and community engagement plan update.
Was there any, I'm sorry to interrupt, was there any public comment on that item? Sarah?
So typically we don't do public comment for just activity updates.
Okay.
We kind of.
I didn't know, because they went pretty far into a discussion, so I just want to make sure.
Right. This upcoming item will have public comment.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and share. Okay, Great. So we're talking about community engagement. So we brought community engagement to the last GPAC meeting, but subsequent to that, found that there was still a little bit of clarity that was needed. And so we wanted to just make sure everyone was on the very same page. So we wanted to talk a little bit more about the engagement plan, remind everyone of our group charter, talk about the timelines a little bit and the deadlines that we're required to accomplish. And then the GPAC role in the engagement process, which I outlined in the staff report as an introduction to the public, that there is in fact a GPAC, a general plan update process, and that there are events and meetings happening. Then providing information to the public, and really we're directing everyone back to the website. That's going to be a key factor. And then receiving input, again, directing everyone back to the engagement platform in order to consolidate their input. And then we also just wanted to talk about our revised engagement strategy in terms of, or at least the timeline, to make sure everyone's comfortable with that and to make sure everyone's clear about what we're doing, how and why. So in terms of the role of the GPAC, and again, just keeping in mind that the staff has GPAC as the audience as well as the public. So bear with us. I know you know this, some of you, most of you all know this, but just making sure that everyone is informed and on the same page. So there is this dialogue, right? Council created GPAC or appointed GPAC in order to be the liaison between the public and council, and to do that hard work of actually developing the goals, policies, and programs. But there is sort of a way to go about that, right? Because if each one of you were to receive a separate email from someone, there's not really a good way to coalesce that information. And so again, we're gonna wanna make sure that people have the opportunity to provide input after they've been informed, and in the right time and right place. So there are a couple of things that we know. So we know that we have a RENA allocation. We don't know exactly what that number is yet. It was 1660, now it's 2114, but also subject to change. But regardless, we know we absolutely have to plan for additional housing units, state law. We also know that we have to plan to rezone BART, also a state law, AB 2923. And we also know that council has appointed GPAC for the purpose of updating the general plan and the housing element. And then we have a series of deadlines and timelines that we have to comply with. As Mayor Kendall mentioned, there is the possibility of appealing those allocations, but we haven't been given direction from council to do that because it's not the right time yet, and we don't know the outcome of that. So if we were to wait and not move forward and do the groundwork and community engagement, the timeline would be even more condensed, and folks might be even more confused about, what we have to do and why. So we have one element and we have three timelines. We have our statutory deadlines. We have the housing element. So I'll just go over this quickly. So this is the AB 2923 requirement, as Diana mentioned, is required to be upzoned based on the law by July 2022. The housing element has to be adopted by the end of 2022, essentially the January 2023. And then our overall general plan, which has other elements besides the housing element, is anticipated to go a few more years. Then we have the housing element specific timeline, which has a series of timelines and deadlines like the draft allocations, and when we need to give it back to HCD for them to say this looks right or not and give us comments, and we might have to make adjustments. And then we have our community engagement timeline, which is kind of how we're getting information to the public, getting information from the public, and then creating the actual documents, as well as the environmental review. So there's sort of a slightly different process this is the overall engagement process to create the document, right? So we have to do the public engagement and also look at what we have, what our existing general plan says, and also create potentially new content. And we're still in our informed stage with getting the information out that we even have a general plan and that we are doing an update. So we are wanting to make sure everyone's clear about how GPAC is involved to get others involved. So your particular role, as I mentioned, is to introduce the idea that we're doing the general plan update, that there is a housing element, just getting the word out, right? Just to say this exists so that people know that that there is an opportunity to participate and they can participate. And then it's getting the information out, right? What is the housing element? What is RHNA? All of that like detailed information. And then there's receiving the input, right? So coalescing all of the information into hopefully the online engagement platform so that we can actually use it to make decisions. So we previously sent out sort of a very lengthy timeline, which had different activities and when they might be published. We've learned that we need to be flexible in that. And so we're actually seeking approval from GPAC to just highlight sort of the major items. And so we're anticipating doing district town halls or information sessions for each of the geographic regions, because as Carol mentioned, all of the different groups will be sort of also within the geographic region, right? So you're going to reach the youth and the seniors and the schools and all the things that are within each geographic region. So this will be sort of our universal slideshow or video that we'll ultimately create so that you will have the actual session. So it'll be a live session, and then there'll also be a video. So if someone can't make it or whatever, they can look at the video and still get the same information. So it's not just that one time and place. And then as maybe you saw being GPAC members, this is some example of how we might get the word out, how we might, say that this is happening and how you can get involved. We also anticipate, so this is the flyer, the actual mailer that we sent out to all of every single person, and we printed extra copies and went downtown and passed them out to businesses to get people to apply to be on GPAC. So something similar, but we also are going to need your help to get that word out. And then this is an example, it's in progress, but then when we talk about housing specifically at the town halls, this is an example of what might go out as well. And then we had previously talked about sort of the outreach methods, right, through social media, through Vistas, through the Friday Roundup, the website, the direct mailings, etc. So we want to make sure that we definitely get the communication out, right? And we're going to do that with communicating with the people we're connected with. So this is sort of a two-way process, as we talked about in the beginning. Sort of we're disseminating information at this point, and then beyond that, we're going to be receiving information, right? So we're going to send it out and then get it back. But none of you are responsible for accepting any comments per se, right? Because we need to focus that into the database that is the online engagement platform, just to make sure that it is coalesced into one location at the right time after they've been informed about whatever it is that they're giving their opinion about, right? So it's just like you wouldn't take a test without studying for it. So you want to make sure everyone is informed, and then we'll get the input. And so
what about you've only got 4 GPAC people there. What about the rest of us who represent the groups? You only have the area people there.
Right. And so I'm just going to finish my presentation and we'll come back to that. Okay. So your relationships are the ones that are how we're going to get the word out, right? We can send out an email and someone may or may not attend the event, right? They don't know really what it's about. But if you talk to someone, I will use the example of a coffee shop, which is not really an example anymore, but if you run into someone in the street and they ask you a question, or you just say, hey, you should get involved, or they're more likely to get involved. So we really want you to reach out to everyone that you know and really send them back to the website, right? Where to find information, just that there is a process and where to find the information. And then hopefully they'll go back there at the end, right? When there is the engagement platform up and running. So the stakeholder list, which this is just an example, it's in progress. But as an example, we need to document who we've contacted so that we can make sure that everyone has been covered. So we have created this document, which we will send out, and every one of you will be able to edit it and add to it. We'll create all of the stakeholders, who the contact is, the 3 different types of engagement, right? Or have you introduced it? Have you informed them? And then have we received input? And the date of those contacts, and then who the GPAC or staff member is that connected with them, and then any notes or outcomes. So this will be populated with all of the stakeholders, and then we'll have a date by which everyone needs to contact. And if they're not contacted, staff will do that to make sure that everyone has been addressed. This document also has an opportunity for you to request presentations if someone wants to, but again, that video will be available so anyone can watch it at any time. So what does the digital platform and engagement look like? We brought that to the GPAC several meetings ago, and there is still a video that kind of shows the outline of what that looks like, but we wanted to show you very specifically where to look on the website. So this is the general plan website. It's under the Get Involved stage. So there will be, there's not live links yet because it's not there. Staff needs to develop the content, but this will be the location where you will put the information when you're ready to give information. So it'll link to Engagement HQ, which is also called Bang the Table. If someone has a burning question or burning idea right now, they can already write into this using this section. But again, ideally, we're taking those sort of disparate pieces of information and coalescing them is challenging. So we want to direct everyone back to Engagement HQ. And also just making sure everyone knows to sign up for e-notifications, every chance to plug that as possible. And then, for instance, the quick links would be where we might put those video links so that it's easy to see just on the homepage exactly where, kind of basic information. I think under elements, there's also a section it's elements, housing element. There's a section for each of the elements. And if you click on housing, that gives you all of the information, including the global PowerPoints, previous GPAC meetings that we've already done to kind of give some background information. All of that information is sort of the one-stop shop that we had discussed at this group previously. So we just wanted to make sure that the method and process is clear, that it's acceptable. How can we do it better? We're in this together. We're wanting to make sure that we do the most robust engagement possible. And then also just making sure that the GPAC approves of the revised engagement schedule of those major meetings, the town hall info sessions, the charrettes, and the engagement HQ going live. Because we want to print that on the potential mailer that goes out to everyone, so that we're reaching not only those who use digital media, but also everyone physically in the city. And Namratha already wants to advertise for the youth town hall, so we want to give her that opportunity. Okay, and with that.
Thank you, Sarah. Does any committee members have questions for Sarah on this? No, not yet.
Oh, Chris, can you see?
Oh, Dick. I see Dick with his hand up.
Yeah, Christine was ahead of me. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, go ahead, Christine.
Quick question, Sarah. Jonathan had contacted me with the 11th, February 11th for the Burton Valley. I had accepted that date and have been telling people that is the date. Is the 18th, which is what I saw in the advertisement there. Is that a hard date, or can we move it back to the 11th? Which is what?
Yeah, we could do that. The challenge that we have is that there are deadlines for getting the mailers out, so we need to
I see.
Send it.
Okay.
Renata, can you correct me? I think it's 5 days that we need to send it out, so we could do it, but that would only give them a 2-day notice.
Oh, maybe. Okay. All right. I'll just contact my people and say that we needed a little more time. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. my question, the whole town is carved up into these 4 districts. Is that the understanding? Is there a map somewhere and also a general population? So everybody in the district is going to be notified of the town hall, or how is that all going to play out?
Right, so these mailers would go to every single household, and they would list out that there'd be a town hall for Burton Valley here, a town hall for Acalanes here, on this time and date, and here's where you go, so that they can attend that if they want. Again, it'll be videotaped, so if they can't attend that evening, they can watch it later. And shorter presentations will also be taped, so.
Okay, and there's a map there, so you know which your district is, some of it?
Yes, so there is a map on the general plan website, which is the districts for the GPAC representatives. But we can also send that out and or potentially add it to the flyer if there is room. And so I guess the thing too is essentially it's going to be very similar information, right? It's more of a, we're giving the information out. All of the items that are in the global PowerPoints that you've all received already and possibly people have seen already, but you know, the idea is that if people hear about it 5 times, that's a good thing, right? We want them to really, because there's always questions, and just making sure they really understand it and that they know that all of the opportunities get involved.
Okay, thanks.
Great. All right. We have Carol. Jim has his hand up. Matt Peace. Carol, do you want to go?
Okay.
I know you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, Sarah, this is what we talked about, I thought, and Chris, maybe you can chime in here. So you are discussing, and you have dates for the 4 people that represent areas. Now, the 6 of us that represent groups, we're not even on your chart there. So it's my understanding what we will do is go to our groups. Okay. So if you take away, the groups are all on the stakeholder list. So if you take those 6 groups away, there are 50 stakeholders left. And my question was, I don't feel it's the 6 of us, it's our responsibility to go out to 50 stakeholders. I sort of don't know how this happened.
Right.
I think we need to clarify that. And we talked about a way of doing it, I thought, at our little meeting, but I didn't see it represented here.
Right. And again, I think we were clarifying that it's not necessarily your responsibility to give all 50 stakeholders the information or the presentations, but really just to reach out to let them know where they can find the information, or that there is a town hall for their region, or that there is an opportunity to connect. So it's just a matter of reaching out and using your connections and relationships that you already have in order to do that. And then anything that's not taken, staff will do.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
So Sarah, I'm thinking that maybe you and I can review what that stakeholder list is, the remaining 50. And then, I mean, I'm an at-large representative, so I have no district, I have no group, so I can help with the stakeholders. Anybody who feels like they also have a relationship with the stakeholders that aren't assigned to a group may also want to help. So I'm thinking maybe offline for the next 2 weeks, we can kind of figure out a communication process to those stakeholders.
Right, and so that's also why I was creating that, the shared Google Sheet, which will have a list of all those stakeholders. Any one of you will have access to that. If you feel comfortable reaching out to someone, you can fill it in. And if you don't, we'll have a documentation of who's not been reached out to, and staff will absolutely do that.
Okay.
I have another question on that. So you reach out, let's say I reach out to the church and I talk to the pastor, and he thinks, oh, that's a good idea. Okay, let me talk to the council. And so maybe it's a couple weeks and maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't, and a month goes by. And I mean, is there any follow-up on any of this, that they actually did something? Or so then all those people
Yeah. So I
are
think
not contacted, and they're going to say, well, I never heard about it. And then I would say, well, we talked to your pastor. It's his fault if he didn't send it out.
Well, I think that's why we're trying to connect with so many people on so many different levels, right? Each one of you probably is sort of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or whatever that is, where, right, that you're all connected in some way. And so if all of you reach out to all of your networks and their networks and their networks, that everyone will have multiple touches multiple times. So if someone fails, they're probably going to get it somewhere else.
Right.
But we did our, like, I mean, you can only do so much, right? You can give the information and kind of use your relationships to help them understand why it's important, why it's valuable, and hopefully they can pass that information on.
Okay, well, I've got one more question. All right, so I thought we, the group people, were going to get a standard presentation. You talked about that with a video, with a voice.
Right. And
but
so
I guess we're not. My Park and Rec meeting is next week, then there's not another one till March.
Yes.
So if we're going to get the meeting out now, I probably should follow what Don did. Right? I mean, it's not going to be available for next week, right?
So I think we also got the message that using a meeting for doing the presentation was maybe not an effective use of time because your agendas are full. And so the thought was to do the video so that you could direct them where to find it, and they could direct their contacts where to find it, so that everyone is getting that same information, but not impacting your schedule.
Okay, so I'll wait till it's ready. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
All right. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That was really helpful. Thank you very much. So I was thinking about this in part because the Release Valley session was going to be this Thursday, so I'm really appreciative that that's been pushed back. And I was thinking, like, as a district representative, I wanted to drive out a message to some of the different homeowner groups in this area. And in the thought being maybe that if I did that and I could reference this upcoming mailer, that would, help expand the touch points that people will have in advance of whatever session we got in later in March. So will you get out to us like a heads up of when the mailer would go out? That would be useful, because that would be something that we could reference if we're communicating to people that's something people should look for. So
absolutely. And I think if GPAC is comfortable with the schedule that we've outlined of the major events, that's something we can do in very short order.
Okay. And I think having that map showing the rough boundaries of the districts could be useful too, if you can cram it in the flyer without making it all microscopic. That'd be great. One thing I was thinking of though, so there's going to be a presentation, and I was thinking that maybe before the first session rolls out, which I guess would be for Burton Valley, it might be good just to walk through that, because I would think you want this thing to be an hour and a half tops. We're getting people, it's likely evening, and having a 2 or 3 hour session, I don't think it's going to go over well. So having something which is tight and organized and within a certain time frame,
right,
I think is something we want. Otherwise, we're going to lose people, I would think.
We're definitely open to kind of how this is done, but staff's vision is that we do that sort of information push, and then let them know, when they can, like, we're going to do a staff, and any GPAC member is welcome to attend sort of a Q&A session, so that they can like digest the information and then come back with a Q&A. And then the charrette week will have sort of this opportunity for people to talk with each other, rather than sort of, just so that it's a community sort of conversation, rather than just we're giving you the information, you digest it, and then you talk with your neighbors, talk about your ideas. And then once that's been done, take the input.
Okay, so the charrette is the event that's happening a week of March 22nd then, looking at this. So that's the sequencing here.
That's the intention. And please let me know if it's not clear, because I can try and make that more clear.
Okay.
Sarah, what time is the presentation supposed to start? Was it 6 or 7 for Burton Valley?
That is a great question. Jonathan, are you still
I need to know.
Yes, it was previously planned for 6 p.m.
6 p.m. So approximately 6 to 7:30 was the time then? Okay. And that is February 18th, right? For sure.
Assuming the group tonight approves the schedule that we've outlined.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions.
My hand, oh, sorry, I had my hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm representing a more of a unique group within Lafayette, the nonprofits. So many of them may work in and not live in Lafayette, though the organizations are based in Lafayette. I'm thinking it might be best to have a separate meeting and not have them join a meeting that's represented by homeowners and people in other parts of town. So I'd request like a nonprofit. I also have the churches, the synagogues, some of the schools in it as well, and I'd be more than glad to share that list with the group.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right. I think at this point we open the meeting up to public comments. And as I said before, we'll observe a 3-minute length. Jonathan will keep us honest. And, the committee can ask questions of the commenter, and hopefully we're still aiming for 8 o'clock, so.
So if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function or *9 if you're calling in. Looks like Cheryl would like to make a comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. You don't have all the things. So I'm just
It's a little muffled, Cheryl. Are you covering the microphone?
Maybe. I'm using a different device. Can you hear me?
Sort of.
If there's another speaker, I'll call back on my other phone. This isn't a very good device, obviously.
It was better.
Okay. So I really just wanted to know if you were going to consider reaching out to LHC, Lafayette Homeowners. They have access to a lot of the HOA presidents already, and that might be a really good way of getting them involved, so that maybe those HOA presidents can reach out to their neighbors and help out, get the word out. If there was something that was already written up that they might be able to send out. Have you thought about putting a little more than a flyer? Is the flyer going to have an enticing thing about why people should get involved? If it's just got information, I think it's going to be a little bit over people's heads because they're not even going to have ever heard of a housing element. So I'm just curious. I haven't seen it, but just something that like a nugget, something that draws them in, bites why they should get involved. Just a thought. And then usually you're getting better at this, but please spell out all acronyms. And that'll be it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Well, good
Anyone
point.
have any questions for Cheryl? All right. Do we have another public comment waiting?
I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay. well, we can move on to our next agenda item, which is.
So actually, before we do move on, I just want to make sure that the group is comfortable with the schedule outline so that we can move forward with advertising as soon as possible.
I'll make a motion to accept it.
Yes.
We had
Motion
a
made
hand
by-
raised from Dawn.
No, I was just putting thumbs up. I didn't, I know we need to vote. I'm sorry.
Let's just go ahead and do a roll call vote just to make it official.
Okay.
It looks like Matt made the motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
Richard, I mean, Dick?
Sarah?
Yeah.
We had a hand raised from Dawn from the public.
Oh, I think he was just giving his, from the public. Sorry.
Yes.
Apologies. One more public comment. He did keep us honest.
Okay, hi.
Hi, Don.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I was wondering how the housing element outreach is going to get to actual property owners. You mentioned it was going to be residents, but a lot of the property owners in all of the downtown, which I guess is now including East and West End, may not be included, and they may live out of town. How are they going to be notified?
So I think, sorry, I'm not following Chair Lee's rule of, so you have 3 minutes to finish your public comment and then we'll.
Okay, and
That's
I
right.
have another question then. About
Okay.
the districts. You only have downtown, Burton, Happy Valley, and Acalanes, and the downtown is separate or should be separate from the East and the West End because they have separate needs and issues. So is there any way to divide that up?
Sarah, do you want to respond as to how those were determined?
Why don't we let her finish her comments?
Okay.
Okay, the third one is engagement. I believe the East and West End, since they have larger properties and they are also the business and housing by right on the commercial East End, that they are going to be most impacted by the housing element. So that's why I'm asking about property owners on the East End for outreach as far as the housing element discussion. And mailers everywhere in the city, who is included. I have often not gotten, as a property owner in Lafayette, of any of the vistas or anything related to the city projects that are going on, even though I'm a property owner, although I do live out of town. And how is the communications director, I guess Jeff Heyman, involved in helping the GPAC getting information out, other than a lot of blasts, but it's not all coordinated into one area? And how somebody mentioned about a Burton Valley meeting about the presentation about GPAC, and how do I find out where and when those meetings and times are for the areas? I guess only the 4 areas here. Downtown, Burton, Happy Valley, and Acalanes. That's it. Those are all my comments. Sorry, it's a lot of questions.
Any committee members would like to ask further questions of Dawn? No?
Got a valid point.
Actually, if this is Susie Kelly, because I'm representing downtown, specifically, what do you feel the needs are that are different concerning the East and the West?
Downtown is pretty much already developed, although some of like Hugh Ho Avenue, I guess, is going in and the terraces, but the East End is all commercial, zoned C1 commercial. So, and right now it is only housing by right, which means any developer can come in and put in as many housing elements, housing units in that they want. But then where does the city get their tax money from the businesses that collect taxes? So I'm concerned about that particular aspect.
I'll just kind of point out a point of clarification that we're not really allowed to speak on any item that's not listed on the agenda. And at this point, we're still talking about the outreach and engagement plan. And while this is very helpful and useful information, again, we want it focused in the right place at the right time so we can use it.
Okay, so could we at least divide up the downtown, since on either the general plan, the downtown specific plan, and the downtown, the DGG, downtown guidelines. Sarah, you know that one. They all identify the downtown in 3 different areas, which is the east end, the downtown core, which is from First Street to Mountain View Avenue, I believe, and then the west end. They're all 3 separate areas. So I think those need to be divided up.
Yeah. And so I think I'm happy to have a chat with you offline, but just to briefly respond to you, I think what we might do is add those as sort of stakeholder areas. But the sort of GPAC districts were established many months ago and sanctioned by the council, and they're sort of just geographic regions to break up the city so that we can have a representative from each area because they might be just making sure that that information is placed in the plan and the interests are there. So the downtown person will certainly be looking at each of those sections, and we can make sure to add East End and West End as stakeholder elements.
Who is the downtown person?
That would be Susie Kelly.
Susie, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dawn.
All right, thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
Any more public comments before we move on?
Let's see here. I don't see, oh, Rebecca.
All I just wanted to say is thank you. You guys have put in so much work, and it's just, I feel like as a person in the public following this process, when things go really well, I just want to appreciate that. And I just think you heard a lot of the comments and have clearly adopted them in this engagement plan, and just appreciate that. So.
Thank you. Okay. Any more public comments, Sarah?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay. Well, we can move on to the next presentation.
Oh, sorry, we were almost done with ready for a roll call vote. We had a
Oh, exactly.
and a second by Dick.
Okay. Roll call vote.
Alrighty. Chris Lee,
Aye.
Jim Cervantes,
Aye.
Christine Rasmussen,
Aye.
Susie Kelly,
Aye.
Mike Kim,
Aye.
Dick Craig,
Aye.
Carol Singer,
Aye.
Namrata Kasalanati, absent. Don Jenkins,
Aye.
Matt Pease. Oh, you're muted. Oh,
There we go. Aye, sorry.
thank you. Beth Needle.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Motion carries.
Excellent. Progress. All right. Sarah, we can move to the presentation. Our next presentation is on ADUs.
All right, thank you. So at the last GPAC meeting, the committee asked that we return with the conversation about accessory dwelling units. It's going to help generally with our discussion about the housing element, but also to follow up on how ADUs count towards our RHNA numbers. So we'll go over what is an ADU, why are they useful, how has the city's ADU ordinance been updated in response to state law, what properties can have ADUs, how does one apply for an ADU, and again, how do ADUs count towards RHNA reporting. So an accessory dwelling unit, also known as an ADU, second unit, granny flat, in-law unit, is a dwelling unit that that accompanies a primary residence, but contains provisions for living, cooking, eating, sleeping, and sanitation that are independent and separate from that primary residence. ADUs can be detached or contained within existing or proposed residential building. We also have junior accessory dwelling units, JADUs, which are a little bit different. They are contained entirely within existing or proposed single-family residential building. They have standards for the minimum appliances and sizes of a kitchen. Another difference between a JADU and an ADU is that the sanitation facilities can be shared with the primary residence, whereas a full ADU has to have separate facilities. And also junior ADU, it can be no greater than 500 square feet. So the image here to the right shows that also that separation and difference. So the green box in the rear yard is an example of an ADU, new detached ADU, and then the green portion up front is a conversion of existing space into a JADU. ADUs are useful because they provide much needed housing for many different types of groups, but including students and aging parents because of their smaller size. And they also provide a source of rental income for property owners. So it's a good marketing tactic. When selling the residence, you can market it further by having an ADU as well. They're also important because given their size and character as accessory to primary residences, we can increase our density and allow for more housing, but keep it hidden and spread throughout the city because of their smaller size. ADUs are not new, but certainly their popularity has increased, especially within the last year. In early 2020, the City Council adopted a comprehensive update to its existing ADU ordinance in response to a series of state bills that went into effect the first of that year. Those state laws aim to limit local regulation of ADUs by increasing the number of zoning districts that could allow for ADUs. So previously, it was only single-family residential zoning districts, but now it's single-family and multifamily. They also limited the impact fees that could be collected. Now it's based on the size of the ADU in proportion to the residence that's on the property. It also excludes collecting impact fees for ADUs that are less than 750 square feet. That state law also reduced the city's ability to apply architectural compatibility for ADUs. So now it's only limited to a select group of ADUs that we'll go on to talk about a little bit later, Class C ADUs. And in general, state law was proposed to increase the production of ADUs across California, which certainly has been seen in Lafayette. And we'll also talk about that later in the presentation. So in response to state legislation, again, in early 2020, Lafayette updated its ADU ordinance and now categorizes ADUs into three classes, Class A, B, and C. Class A is for detached ADUs of a limited size. Class B is for ADUs that are created from converting existing space. And Class C are ADUs that don't fit in either of those categories. So Class A and B are to be reviewed by a building permit and approved over the counter if they meet a very specific or very minimal set of standards, setbacks, building height, size. Class C ADUs, because they don't fit within either of those categories, the city is allowed to apply a greater set of development standards. That includes architectural compatibility, parking requirements, creek setback requirements, those types of things. So any parcel with an existing or proposed dwelling unit is allowed to build an ADU. And this is where it expanded post 2020 to include multifamily. So for a single family zoning district, it is a lot is allowed a maximum of 1 ADU plus 1 JADU. So possibly a new detached ADU and a JADU that's from converted space. In the multifamily zoning districts, there's a maximum allowance of 2 detached ADUs plus additional ADUs created from the conversion of existing living space. So in multifamily zoning districts, the number of allowable ADUs is in part based on the number of multifamily units. And also a quick plug, if you're unaware of your zoning, you could visit the city's interactive map to look up the zoning of your property or speak with the planner and we will let you know. So what is the process to permit an ADU? First, the applicant should review the Class A, B, and C standards in the city's ADU ordinance. Speak with the planner if you have any further questions. If they're proposing a Class A or B ADU, submit a building permit. If it's Class C, submit an ADU application. There are impact fees for ADUs that are greater than 750 square feet. Next step would be to obtain over-the-counter approval. Again, no public hearing. That's another change post 2020 is ADUs have to be approved over the counter, no public hearing. And lastly is to record a deed restriction. So with those changes in state law and the city's ordinance and the changes in the city's process, how has ADU production been affected? So this is a chart showing the number of ADU applications we received in the last 6 years. As you can see, from 2016 to 2019, peaked at the low teens, 14 applications received. And 2020, there you go, with the city's new ADU ordinance, it bumped up from 14 to 33. And in 2021, we are on track to either meet that or possibly exceed that because in January alone, we've received 3 applications. So now we'll turn it over to Diana, who can talk about how this counts towards RHNA.
Thanks, Jonathan. New ADU units, including JADU units, can count towards planning and reporting for RHNA allocation. As we mentioned before in a previous slide, because of their size, and they generally rent for less. And for the last year and a half, I've been collecting data on rents on in-law units and ADU units in Lafayette to determine what exactly we can classify these units as. Most likely it'll be moderate income. It probably won't be low or very low, but moderate income units, which is a great benefit to the city. The guidance right now from the state is that it's different than for new development. We have to look at past production, and so the requirements are basically look at the last 5 years. This is an example on the right. It's obviously not specific to Lafayette, but if you had 260 units over the last 5 years that the city has permitted, then you divide it by the 5 years, and the average is 52 units a year. We can count towards future production, that average 52 units times 8 years. That's the 8-year cycle of RHNA. So we could count 416 units within the 8-year cycle towards our RHNA allocation. Next one.
All right. I can go over this, Dana, if you have anything else that you wanted to touch on.
Well, the only thing I wanted to add is that if there may be a point at which we can argue for pent-up demand, since the permits in 2020 were significantly higher than previous years. We may be able to argue pent-up demand. It continues to improve, and especially since 3 applications in just the month of January, we may be able to argue for a greater number of units for the 8 years. Anyway, that's it.
All right, thanks. So the key takeaways are Lafayette ADU regulations have been streamlined for more efficient processing. ADUs can be part of the solution towards meeting housing goals. It's one of the tools in our hefty toolbox. And to learn more about ADUs, you can visit lovelafayette.org. Here for any questions. We'll we're also looking for feedback from the committee if they want us to return with any additional information.
Okay, I see hands up for Dick and Matt. Anyone else?
Maybe.
Okay.
Dick, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thanks. Quick question, Jonathan. When during the year did the new regulations take effect?
January 1st, 2020.
Oh, so it's from the get-go. Okay, so we had a full year of the new rules. Okay, thanks.
Jonathan, looking back on what people are actually charging for rent here in Lafayette, are you finding that they tend to fit into that low or very low, or do they tend to be more moderate? Which level of income are they actually hitting?
I can answer that.
Okay, thank you, Diana.
It's mostly moderate income.
Okay.
It's not above moderate. It's slightly below, just based on the size of the units and the number of amenities. But at least right now, what I'm seeing is a trend towards moderate, which is great because this is a segment of the community, actually a community in the Bay Area that is not very well served by housing.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Kendall?
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation. So yeah, I am a fan of ADUs. I think they're great. And so I was not resistant on signing this new legislation. The question, so are they required to make them deed restricted? And are all of the ADU, that's the first question, are pretty much all of the ADU owners and developers, are they actually making them deed restricted?
The answer is no, they're not. They don't need to be deed restricted, but if they want to do lower income and they want to count for lower income below moderate, they need to deed restrict because there's no other way to actually get that. Yes. Oh, look, Sarah is waving her hand.
And I just want to make certain that there's some clarity around, like, generally when we talk about affordable housing, there's a deed restriction to make sure that it remains affordable. And then for a second dwelling unit, there's a deed restriction that says you're not going to sell it as a separate unit, that it goes with the property.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay, so they got a deed restriction, so they're not going to sell it separate from the property.
Right.
But to count towards our RENA, I know you're counting up all the rents, regardless of whether they deed restricted or not, and that's what you're waiting on the state to see if that counts. Is that how?
Right now, yes. Right now, the guidance is collect information about your existing, like through Craigslist or apartments.com. And that's really where we're looking for an indication of the prices that actually people are asking.
Awesome. So I know you didn't mention setbacks, and I think that was another thing, that the state laws were different than our existing laws that we used to have for ADUs. And it seems like right now we're down to 4 feet setbacks. And I just kind of want to manage that expectation for people when they are looking at new ADUs. Yeah, they are allowed to be a lot closer to the fence lines than our old ordinances and zoning laws would have allowed. And so that is something that we didn't have a choice about as a city. We get the 4 feet setbacks. And sometimes, there's instances where they go to 0 or not.
Jonathan, you want me
Sure.
to?
Yeah. In our code, it does not, for single family, it does not identify I'm sorry. Oh, did you want to touch on that?
I was just going to mention that so if it's a conversion and it's already at that setback, then we can't change that, right? So any new construction would need to meet the 4 foot setback, side and rear.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's it. Thank you.
All right, I see Don and Christine. Don, I think you were first.
My question is why is the number of ADUs all of a sudden bumped? Did something change at the city or at the state level that made them so much more popular in Lafayette?
I can answer that. The state law changed to make it more easy for homeowners to do it. And
Okay, before it was just
took out a whole bunch of constraints. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and I'll just speak to that a little bit too. I think that one of the major constraints that we found in looking at it historically were the implications for development fees, development impact fees. And so the state law allowed for anything that was less than a certain size threshold to not have any fees at all, any development fees. So those are like parkland fees, drainage impact fees, those types of things that would help to mitigate impacts of new residents in the city. If it's over that, then it's proportional to the house. So it's those have changed significantly and gone down.
Christine, you had a question?
So on these ADUs and junior ADUs and these class Cs, I guess, I was trying to look real quick, is there parking requirements for these? Off-street parking requirements?
There are off-street parking requirements for Class C ADUs. So generally
Only the Class C,
Yes, so generally one space per ADU.
off-street, okay. All right, thank you. Oh, and then one other quick question for Diana. So they do a 5-year look back and you present them with the rents, approximate rents that you've seen, but you're not going you're just taking notes on what you've seen for them, generally speaking, so you haven't actually spoken to the homeowner about what the contract is on
All
those?
based on the advertised price. And
Advertised price.
I should put also a caveat in there that another jurisdiction, a series of jurisdictions that I work with, are working with the state to develop some guidelines about that. So hopefully we will get like a thumbs up on whatever our methodology is.
And then, so it may be advertised. What if it's like a short-term rental, like an Airbnb? Does that count too, or is that not?
No, it doesn't count. The stuff I'm tracking are, units that are, it's not an Airbnb, it's a long-term rental. It's, at least a 6-month or even a 1 month.
6 month. Wow.
A 1 month rent to a full year's rent. Yeah.
Okay.
So no, I'm tracking apartments where people are looking to be there for the long haul.
Okay. And then they have, depending on those charts they gave us, then you determine if they're going to be low income, or then below market. And then you'll write all these down and then you'll have to resubmit this every year, or is this sort of where they're going to trust you from,
Well, if we can
certain day
make the
going
case,
forward?
then that should not be a problem. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. Jim, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so I guess if I'm thinking the math right, if we could take the more aggressive approach, which is looking back to last year's experience, extrapolating 30 times 8, 240, that's a tick over 10% of our current requirement for housing, I would think. So it's 10% of the challenge, but that's probably the extent of what we get out of ADUs in terms of the overall housing element. I just want to be clear I'm doing the math right.
It looks like Dana's saying yes.
Thumbs up. Okay.
And then
Thank you.
Sorry.
just to kind of add on to that as well, and what Mayor Kendall had mentioned, just kind of how this relates to what the outcomes of our goals, policies, and programs are for the housing element. Perhaps we want to think about ideas or ways to incentivize people to deed restrict so that we can use different, it's not only moderate income.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Is that deed restriction in perpetuity, or is there a term?
Typically for a rental, it's like 55 years, although like the inclusionary zoning ordinance in the city is 55 years for rental. The city could decide 10 years or whatever. We just need to be, cognizant of what the state requires and make a case.
Don?
This last week was part of Llama in the Village. We had a speaker come talk to us from Covia. And this is a group here in Contra Costa and Alameda County that is doing home sharing, so that a person is not a renter, but rather considered a lodger. Is anything like that allowed into what we're trying to hammer through in terms of counting towards the low income? Obviously, the people that are coming to do this are very low income people that are looking for a space to lay their head.
Right.
Uh,
The
does
answer
that-
is no, because it's really about the affordability of the unit and regardless of who's in it. And so we have to be able to make a case for the affordability of the actual unit.
Okay.
If the ADU calculation, Diana, is we only get credit for the ones that's built, yet from the housing element standpoint, we have to zone for 2,100 plus the buffer.
Mhm.
Why couldn't we say that the trend lines show that ADUs will be built in the following rate and effectively make that part of our zoning?
I suppose it's possible, but we would have to be able to justify a rationale for that. And so far, the state is, for ADUs at least, the state is only looking at backward looking. Like, what have you done in the past?
But isn't that the rationale?
Well, yes, but I think that if you want to say, oh, okay, we're going to plan for X number, well, then we need to have programs in place that would say, we're going to push development on these single family homes, which the state has been reluctant to do. But I agree, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, interesting.
All right. Anyone have any more questions before we open to public comments?
Yeah, I think that idea, if we take it one step further and we effectively upzone every single family home with ADU, just make it a formality, we do it. I think that would strengthen our case for counting future production for ADUs as a credit towards the RENA allocation.
So, and maybe I'm not understanding the comment clearly, but I just want to make sure everyone knows that every single parcel in the city is allowed to have every single family is allowed to have a main unit and a second dwelling unit currently. So there would not be any changes to the zoning in order to allow that. Does that make sense?
And a JDU.
And a
So we're allowed
JDU.
to have 3.
Technically 3 units for
Each single is 3 right now.
Okay.
The point is just that we can't count them based on a potential projection of what we think. We have to look backwards and see what has been developed. That's all.
But we have another year to build those numbers up, and if we get another 30 or 40, we can show at least there are 2 dots, and we can begin to draw a straight line. Good.
It's an idea. All right. It's 10 after 8, and let's open this agenda item to public comments, and we'll monitor 3 minutes and hopefully.
I'm sorry, can I just ask one more quick question to planning staff? Has any of the schools approached you about any excess land that they want to repurpose for housing?
Not to my knowledge, but that's certainly something we could reach out to them and ask about as well.
Okay, thanks.
So if you would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand using the raise your hand function at the bottom of the screen, or *9 if you're calling in. I don't see any hands raised. Oh, just one. Admitting Rebecca now.
Just want to say again, thank you for the presentation. That was very, very helpful. And so I just want to say, I think if we can find a way to be able to count those 400 units of ADUs, that would be terrific to know. And the other thing that's interesting is I do think in some of the public information going forward, just because the ADU conversation with the pending legislation at the state level of going to 4 units on a lot, it's just helpful to know we're already at 3. So that change just can be put into context. And so I just wanted to note that. And the other question that I have is there, in our current count, are there any ADUs? So if someone has, like we have a ADU that was here, it was the original cottage for our house. Is that already counted in the sort of number of units in the community? Or is there also, are there some ADUs which were grandfathered that have not ever been counted that might also be counted even though they're not new construction?
I'm happy to answer if Chair Lee is. We had talked about sort of having you do your public comments and then we would ask if there are questions. So I'm trying to follow that protocol. Did you have any other questions or comments, Rebecca?
No, just a question about just how do you handle the existing ADUs and are they counted? I'm assuming they are, but.
So just briefly, the existing ones that we don't know about are not counted. And we have previously talked about potentially doing an amnesty program of some sort to try and get those to come to light. And then we could, in theory, count those as well.
I have one more question for the speaker or comment for the speaker. So the new law, the SB 9, which is the lot split, takes each single family lot and allows it to split into 2. So one single lot goes into 6. It doesn't go from 4. It goes one lot into 6, because right now one lot is 3 and then you split them and both lots go 3. And so you have a total of 6. And that's what the new SB 9 law is about.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. Thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any other public comments waiting?
So I don't know if Christine had a question for the speaker or.
Oh, I did, but I don't know if she's there anymore. And
Okay.
to kind of build on what Mayor Kandel said, if the city would allow it, in certain cases, we could actually build a second junior ADU according to that law. So it would actually be 4 units on each lot to make a total of 8. Just wanted to put that one out there.
That could be, yeah, in certain
Certain cases,
conditions.
certain
Yes,
cases, yes.
correct.
So, yeah.
I am not seeing any other hands raised at this time. So,
Okay. Do any committee members have any more comments on this item? All right, it's 8:12. I think we did a fantastic job managing our
Chris.
time.
Nice job.
Good job.
Good work.
Good job.
And we answered questions, so that was great. Anyway, we're at the end of our agenda, and our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, February 16th.
Charlie, I have one question before we adjourn.
Yes.
When are we going to spend time figuring out the methodology by which we allocate these upzoning on a per parcel by parcel basis?
So I would say that is going to be after we do the public engagement. But if this group feels differently, like you want to start sooner, we can talk about that. But I think it's a good idea to get the sort of what the public sentiment is to kind of play into what those criteria might be.
Okay, I guess my thinking is that in the same way that we are scrutinizing ABAG's calculation methodology as the receiving end of it, so will our population, our neighbors and residents scrutinize the methodology by which we allocate the upzoning. Yet we need this instrument so that we can make this process actually happen. So I think, I'm just concerned that it's going to take time to figure out how to do it. And so I'm wondering, is there already an existing model that's used by other jurisdictions that we can play off of and follow?
I don't know that there is, but we can check into what other jurisdictions do. I think the goal with getting the community input up front is that we don't sort of create our own criteria and then show the community, and then they say, why did you use that criteria, right? So we're kind of helping them understand the parameters, get their input about what they think the criteria should be, and then we take that information in relation to state law and develop the actual criteria that we can, including both the state law and the community input. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely fair enough. But every one of our neighbors is going to say, not in my neighborhood, and here's my 10 reasons why. So I don't know if that's going to be very helpful, but we'll see what they say.
Right. And we wouldn't be asking questions like, should we develop on this street versus that street? It's more like, it would be more broad questions getting at interests rather than positions.
Okay, I have my hand up.
Carol.
Is there, are we going to have a walking tour of
We are.
all
We
the
are.
town or some point?
Yep, we are working on it. We're working on both sort of creating the actual document that you could do a self-guided one. We will organize subgroups for this committee, and then we'll also videotape it so that anyone who is not ambulatory or not able to attend can also view and see what the information we're providing.
Okay, thank you.
One last question.
Yes, Don.
I appreciate having the ability to come by the office and pick up the copies of materials. And particularly, I noted probably 100 letters, and I read about half of them, and I have learned that there is a letter that gets sent out, and there are 7 different ways you say the same damn thing. Are we going to take, how do we take that information that we're hearing from these letters into what we're doing? Because there was some very interesting information about stuff we haven't talked about. And
Certainly. Yeah, and I think, so previously we had talked about how we were going to handle public comment. And that was to give you anything that we received in the interim between your last meeting and the current meeting, but then also bring it back when it is relevant to the discussion more specifically. We are also going through it with a fine-tooth comb and finding pieces of information that we need to kind of add clarity around or create questions in the digital engagement content for. There was something else I was going to say, and it.
okay, so if I read something in that and I have a question, I could send it to you, and we could just correspond via email about something like that, right? Or not?
Or if it's something that's kind of comes up often, for instance, the high fire hazard severity zone item, we come back to the whole group, right, for discussion. Yeah.
Right.
Don, I read the public comments that were attached to the agenda. I didn't read all of them because, as you said, a lot of them were form letters. But there was 1 or 2 neighborhoods. I've lived in Lafayette for 25 years. I have never walked down those streets. And a number of people who lived in those neighborhoods took the time to write a letter. So I feel like one walking tour might be to areas that people are talking about in these public comments, these letters, that we can go and just see for ourselves. I don't know if anybody would be interested in that, but I could sure use a walk to these areas.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Chris, that from a public relations point of view, if we can be seen out in trying to gather information like that, we'll be
Yes.
more friendly than the
Yes.
people that are making these decisions about my house.
Right.
Oh, I like that idea very much. And maybe we could contact some of the people and ask them to join us and talk about it.
That's a good idea.
Is that the Brown Act, or can we do that? Is that all right?
Can do it as long as it's not a quorum of GPAC.
All right, then we couldn't all go together. We'd have to
Could have a walking
decide
tour
who
subcommittee.
wants to go.
We could do it if we noticed it as a public meeting.
There you
Oh,
go. Then it'll become like the Pied Piper and we won't be able to see anything. No.
Well, they notice it as a meeting. That would solve the problem.
Well, that's what-
Oh, there you go. All right, a meeting on the move.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to extend this meeting. I apologize.
No, I think that's a great idea, and I'll take that upon myself to work on that. All right, everyone, thank you so much for your time. I guess all I need to say is this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Thanks very much.
Welcome, Mayor Kendall.
Thank
Welcome,
you,
Mayor Kendall.
Carol.